Thank you, Namita, for inviting me to participate in this seminar and also be more educated about all that is happening in the uh, land laws and its implementation and other problems, particularly in the scheduled areas, as we discussed in this morning. In fact, I must say that I came here more to learn than to, educate you or to say anything of that kind. But then, after hearing the main presentation by Namita and her friends and colleagues, I think it looks that even after 7 decades of independence, the issues that used to confront the British government is still in many areas, in many ways. I think we are confronting those issues. But at the same time, you will appreciate that at least there are some good laws also. You mentioned this, whether it is PESA, FRA, but when it comes to the question of their implementation, there are issues, some challenges. And how to, do things or meet those challenges properly so that the tribal people gets their secure land rights and also in an equitable and sustainable manner, not just, on ad hoc kind of measures. That remains still a challenge. And there are reasons for this. I think I will just initially, I will give some remarks and then I would like to learn more from my learned friend Walter. He works the whole life, he has worked in the tribal areas, so we'll benefit from his, presentation and also the points that he makes. In fact, I know him for the last at least 30 years. In fact, I used to invite him for lectures so that I can learn. I should say I was a student. So nice to meet you, sir. As you all know, there are problems. Problems is that first of all, problems for the poor in general, marginalized, of all kinds of marginalized groups, and the scheduled tribes and, otherwise also scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, and even including women in many cases, they are considered marginalized and vulnerable for various reasons. I'm not going to go into the details of that, but then broadly I will say that we have a special laws, affirmative policies, as you all rightly mentioned in the morning, but despite that, I think things have not improved much. You find in the scheduled areas the concentration of poverty, indebtedness, and the kind of exploitation that goes on even now by the moneylenders, local politicians, and others. So I think something needs to be done at the not only just at the policy making level, but also at the implementation level. How my understanding is that we need to have more of an appropriate institutional framework, laws we have, but at the local level, how to implement those laws effectively. And if still there are some gaps, bring it to the notice of the policymakers and then see how again that can be brought about and then again implemented at the local level. This is the main issue. Otherwise, after all these land laws for prevention of alienation of tribal land, you have PESA. PESA, of course, failed for various reasons, as you know. State governments also played a major role in its failing. Forest Rights Act, we have seen now again that is being diluted in various ways. We have CAMPA now, we have any other state level, some kind of other arrangements to dilute things. In some cases, it is being implemented properly. Gadchiroli and several places, I got some reports where they say, I think it is quite effective. But in many areas, it is not only being effective, it is diluted, and then, in fact, they are trying to say that it is not, effectively implemented the way it should be. And particularly in respect of the community rights on forest land, I think that is neglected in most cases. But then this is a question of, again, implementation, not so much of law. And unless there is some participatory monitoring system, social audit at the local level, unless the tribal themselves as a group, have some kind of watch groups and they try to implement this, this will never be implemented. It will never be implemented because this is the history of our kind of relationship and administration the way we do. If it depends on bureaucracy, that does not always help. Why I'm saying bureaucracy, because if you see even for PESA or even for Forest Rights Act, mainly the forest bureaucracy, which is the main culprit. Government has a good policy, but when you say the Tribal Affairs Ministry, that is the nodal agency, they will do it. But they are weak, both financially and staff-wise and training-wise, and both in the center and also in the states. And the forest officials are very powerful. Even now, even though you say bamboo is no longer their property, tendu leaf is no longer their property, I mean, the tribal people should have rights of not only their use, controlling, regeneration, management, protection, every way that should be with the local people, Gram Sabha and the local people. But that is not being done. And it is the forest bureaucracy which comes in the way. This is my personal kind of observation and experience. You may, I think, either, tell me that I am right, or maybe if I am wrong, you may say I am wrong. But this is my personal observation in some of the states, that it is basically the forest department. They should have no role in this. They should be taken out of this. One day, in fact, I chaired a committee on minor forest produce in 2011. I submitted a report that was basically for implementation of minimum support price and also how to regenerate and protect the minor forest produce. In fact, I remember when Jairam Ramesh chaired a committee, chaired a meeting in which all the forest officials were there, invited, and they are all against it. They said, no, if you give bamboo to tribal people, they will destroy, and that regeneration will not take place, such an important resource, and all that. I said, sir, it is their source of livelihood, and not only that, it is their future. If they know that they need it for their livelihood and for permanent sustainable livelihood, then they will try to regenerate and protect it by all means. And whereas the forest officials, they have only one interest, how to make some money out of that, or say if he is very sincere otherwise and good officer, he will try to see that at least it is implemented in some places. In fact, even this history of success of FRA in some places is there basically because of some good officers. If the collectors are good, it works well. Even in places where there is not much of awareness, there is not much of tribal organizations, but even then it works, mainly because there are some good collectors there. But in places where there is no good officials, and then at the same time there is no awareness and the good, strong organizations of the local people, these things do not work. And this has happened in respect of many land laws, and also it is there in the case of FRA today. You also talked about the mining, dams, and other development projects displacing the tribal population, and also that is highly concentrated in the tribal areas. That is true. I mean, they are all facts and figures. We cannot contradict them. But then the benefits of development in those areas have not gone to the local people. In any case, not only in the tribal areas, even otherwise also. So much of industrialization took place in Bihar, Jharkhand. It is not the local people who really benefit so much, not in terms of royalty, not in terms of employment, not in terms of other benefits. So the conflicts and contradictions come only when you find that the people who have been traditionally residing in those areas, they have a definite source of livelihood, both agricultural land and forest land, and they are dislocated and not getting the benefits of any development that activities that you take up there, whether dams or industry or mining or anything. And then there will be discontent, conflicts, and problems. And that is one reason why in many areas you find there is Naxalism. Whether it is Chhattisgarh, you mentioned about it, Jharkhand, wherever you mentioned, That is one of the reasons. So unless you consciously recognize this fact that there are problems and issues and address it that way, I think this problem will continue. Then I think, as I mentioned, the key challenge today is to see that there is an effective agency for implementation of some of the good laws that we have. Particularly in the 5th schedule areas, this is a major problem. In 6th schedule area, I don't say it so much. Walter, I think, will talk about it more. But normally, it is considered that probably they have more autonomy at the local level than in the 5th scheduled areas. And autonomous district councils and others probably they address these issues, but they are also, I think I visited some of the areas, I find there are a lot of issues. Whether the chiefs, the local chiefs in many areas, whether resident or non-resident chiefs, they give land to outsiders, even for development and other purposes. And a lot of private people, entrepreneurs are now going there, taking away land from the local people, and that has become a source of tension. I saw in Manipur, I saw in Nagaland, and several areas I think it is emerging. So it is not that they are also very free from the kind of problems that we are discussing or highlighting. So I think we need to do more even there. I think at this point of time, maybe I just request Mr. Raghav Chandra, maybe 10 minutes or so, 10 minutes, लीजिए. Thank
you. Friends, the subject of tribals is one such subject which lends itself to perspectives from every single direction. However, the bottom line remains is how do you develop them faster, better, in a more inclusive way. So I'm very happy that CPR has come up with this report on land issues and legal frameworks for dealing with the subject of tribals. I haven't been able to go through the report, but from the synopsis that was earlier sent, I mean, it's very clear, and these are issues which as a nation we are still grappling with. It's a truism that despite so many years after independence, we haven't been able to develop the lot of the tribals at all. I mean, we have, but not significantly enough as to be able to crown ourselves with great favor or glory. Infant mortality rate, as has been pointed out, is practically half of what it is for the general population. Literacy average, there's still a 15-14% gap. BPL, that is the number of tribals who were below the poverty line in 2009-11, in the 2 years period, the lot of tribals that improved was from 47% to 45%. Whereas for the general population, it has come down to 25%. So there's still a gap of about 20% in terms of numbers below the poverty line. This is when the general population statistics would also include the tribals. So as such, if you exclude the tribals, they'll probably have a differential of more than 20%, which is significant. I mean, what are we talking of in terms of equality and income equality, wealth distribution, all that Piketty talks of, unless we can improve the lot of the tribals. Landlessness, yes, significantly greater in the case of tribals. And it's also very correctly pointed out and borrowed from the annual report, no less than of the Ministry of Tribal Affairs, that some 85 lakh tribals have got displaced historically so far, out of which only about 25% have been properly rehabilitated and resettled. And today we have a crisis of Pulavaram, which is looming in the horizon. And, as a National Commission for Scheduled Tribes, we have taken a preliminary meeting on that subject. And it's quite glaring that, whereas the dam construction has reached about 60 or 70% level of attainment, the R&R has practically just not been done. I mean, they built some houses, they built some colonies, but it's not commensurate with the pace of development. So there is clearly not only a gap, a lag in terms of culture, but also in terms of implementation when we talk of issues pertaining to tribal development. As regards the PESA Act, the report says that the Dilip Singh Bhuria report was meant to extend 73rd and 74th constitutional amendments to scheduled areas. Now, I have a point of view on that. My understanding of the Constitution is that the aim of the Constitution was to see that the special position of the scheduled areas is not diluted at any cost by the 73rd and 74th constitutional amendment. It is not that the 73rd and 74th constitutional amendments have to be brought into the tribal areas. It was how to protect the tribal areas from the 73rd and 74th constitutional amendment, which is why section article 243M and 243ZC very clearly say nothing in this part shall apply to the scheduled areas referred to in 244(1) and the tribal areas under 244(2). So thereby that the Constitution in its benign inspirational sort of understanding always wanted to protect the tribals from any kind of further developments such as were brought in through the 73rd and 74th constitutional amendment, which should not mean that tribals are subjected to the same kind of rigmarole as the Panchayati Raj institutions. Meaning thereby, and the derivative of that would be, which has not yet been undertaken, is that the tribals would therefore be able to devise their own sui generis, their own exclusive terms of reference for how to implement Panchayati Raj within their framework, how to implement any kind of developments ensuing from that. PESA was supplementary to the 5th schedule. So my understanding is that PESA is meant to be only a supplement to the 5th schedule. The 5th schedule is powerful enough, it is strong enough, and if it is applied, the 5th schedule by itself is good enough to govern the tribal areas and ensure that they develop in whatever manner that the government of the day, the people of the day want them to develop. PESA is only a supplement to that. It's an enabling provision to kind of guide you to reach there. But it is not an additionality. It is not an improvement over the 5th schedule. The 5th schedule is the mother of everything. So, for all practical purposes, in my understanding of the 5th schedule, and I'm sure there are legal experts here who would that the 5th schedule practically allows the government to function, to treat scheduled areas as union territories. Now that is debatable, whether you would like to govern them as union territories or not, whether you would think that that is a good idea or a bad idea, but the purpose behind that is perhaps that if they want, they can improve the law to a measure where funds can be routed directly to scheduled areas, governance of scheduled areas can be improved to a level where they come at par with places like Goa or any of the union territories, etc. Because if you read the 5th schedule, there is a provision which says, report to the governor, the president, the governor's report to the president regarding the administration of scheduled areas. The governor of each state having scheduled areas therein shall annually be, or whenever so required by the president, make a report to the president regarding the administration of the scheduled areas in that state. And the executive power of the union shall extend to the giving of directions to the state as to the administration of the said areas, meaning thereby that the central government can, for the improvement and the benefit of the tribals, can direct the state government to undertake certain definitive measures and does not have to necessarily depend on the state government to undertake certain measures for the benefit of tribals. It is true that and I'm very happy that these figures are coming out because they are certainly a little blurred. 51 districts are fully scheduled, 72 partially, that 95 administration units in the scheduled areas are urban. Yeah, that brings us to the fact that though PESA has been brought in, an equivalent law for the scheduled areas which are urban has not been brought out. And therein lies the catch that a lot of our hunch in the commission is, and our suspicion that through a kind of creeping sort of way, a lot of villages are being included into municipal areas and thereby being excluded from even PESA and from, the formation of Gram Sabhas. So the commission, and we put up a note to the commission, and the commission has resolved in its last meeting that municipal areas, if they are in scheduled areas, will continue to be scheduled areas. Villages being included in municipal areas will not become descheduled without the commission's permission. So we are recommending this. And certainly there should be equivalent of a PESA or, whatever you call the bill was created, but it has not been canvassed or steered or approved, called the MESA, which is for municipal areas extension of equivalent scheduled areas, blah, blah. So we require an equivalent law because there are lots of municipal areas, for instance, Korba. Now, I've been additional collector Korba, and I realize Korba is such a big urban area today. Korba is a scheduled area, the full district is scheduled, but if an equivalent law was to come and that law was to be suitably worded, you could effectively have that every mayor of Korba will be a tribal. You could have, what is to prevent legally within the framework of the constitution that every corporator will be a tribal, that all the employees of that municipal corporation will be tribals. So that is what the constitution permits you to do, but it has not been undertaken. The district mineral fund is a good beginning. The funds have to be utilized adequately, and I think the officers from the tribal development department should be adequately, involved in ensuring that first and foremost, all those tribals who have been displaced because of urbanization, because of mineralization or mining, because of dams, that they should get proper rehabilitation. And there's a good corpus there in 263 districts, 3,600 crores is not a small sum. It is also heartening that you have brought out this statistic that 38% of forest cover lies in the scheduled areas, which just goes to show how densely involved the scheduled areas are with both the forests and thereby with the tribals, and what kind of synergies that lie there. 37% of the large dams are in scheduled areas, 70% of the mines are in scheduled areas, and 90% of the royalty from mining comes from the scheduled areas. Now, a few other things before this thing close. The Criminal Tribes Act, it's just an observation because you have a small paragraph, chapter on the Criminal Tribes Act who are not scheduled tribes, and they have a separate body now to take care of them, is actually a British way of legitimizing the caste system as they wanted. So, by saying that anyone who was born into a criminal tribe would remain a criminal tribe, and as administrators in the field, as SDMs, as additional collectors, and as district collectors, DMs, we have heard this phrase, pedaishi badmash. Ki wo to saab pedaishi badmash hai. So, khandan, nahi, pedaishi. खानदानी तो अलग है, पैदाइशी बदमाश है, means कि उसकी जाति बदमाश की है. So thereby the British brought about this very, system of caste as a category, and which later got converted to Nigrani Badmash. Today, if you go, so when we used to go as field officers to a thana, we would say कि वो Nigrani Badmash register और अपने registers दिखाओ, तो the thanedar would bring out the registers. One of them would be, साहब ये पैदाइशी बदमाश है ये तो. Which of course has now been changed to Nigrani Badmash. So that's just an aside. In terms of what can be done, so, because the report is, and I can understand, is a little cautious in terms of being prescriptive, which leaves the field open to people like me to talk about. So, now for instance, the Forest Rights Act, as you are aware, and some people, Namita and Haq Saab mentioned about the poor implementation of the Forest Rights Act. So the Forest Rights Act is, I think, a historic measure. you know, in terms of doing something for the tribals, it's one of the most revolutionary, most transformatory, most aggressive, most positive measures that has ever been undertaken in recent times. And it has been implemented to some extent, though not entirely successfully, because wherever we've gone in the field, we've observed that about 60 to 70% applications have been rejected. One reason for rejecting the applications is that because, you know, they have to be first scrutinized by a committee. That committee is a subcommittee of the Gram Sabha. As you are aware, the Gram Sabha consists of all the voting adults of that panchayat. Now, or that Gram Sabha, or whatever the definition of the Gram Sabha in that context, PESA allows you, therefore, Gram Sabhas for hamlets also, so as to make it more unique to the culture of that particular hamlet. So the committee has to, you know, it's in the FRA and the rules made thereunder talk of that it should have a minimum of 10 but a maximum of 15, out of which 1/3 will be tribals. So now you can have a situation where, though it may be a very, very tribal dominated Gram Sabha or area, you might actually have only 1/3 people as tribals, and a decision may go against the tribals. Because nobody wants the tribals, and this is raising another issue of tribals being viewed as privileged. As for instance, in our visits to Kerala, we have found that now there is a new dimension which is emerging of tribals versus non-tribals, where non-tribals are viewing the tribals with suspicion because they are favored and because they have greater proximity to the forest, and therefore, and by the power of the law, they are meant to be privileged. So if only 1/3 are tribals, then you can have a decision going against the tribals easily. And I'm going to put it up before our commission, my recommendation would be that it should be at least 50%, at least in scheduled areas, more than 50% of the committee members should be tribal. Then only can you ensure that a fair treatment is given to the tribals. Otherwise, you will have large-scale rejections. One question which I would like to raise to the House, and which came out in the course of our discussions with Mr. S.C. Jamir, the Governor of Odisha, who is an old northeastern hand, former Chief Minister of Nagaland, and well versed in. He said, "Why are the tribals of the northeast more developed than the tribals in central India?" So this is, a homework question for all the young people who are here. And they should debate it, and all of us should debate it, and I might throw some hints on possible answers for this. The Tribal Advisory Council. Now, the 5th schedule talks that the governor will ensure that every state has, for the benefit and for the guidance of the tribals, a Tribal Advisory Council or a TAC. In our understanding and in our deliberations with the various states, we found that TAC meetings are not happening very regularly. For some time, I was tribal commissioner in Madhya Pradesh. TAC meeting used to take place, conducted by the chief minister, and all the MLAs, all the MPs, all the members of the TAC would be there. But the agenda was so large, and there was so much on the platter and the meeting used to take place at 7 o'clock in the evening or 6:30 in the evening, that by that time, everyone was too busy just trying to ensure that whatever was served on the table, not just the papers, but even the food, they were busy imbibing that. So the point is, the governors have to play a more active role, and they must chair the meetings of the TAC. So I think in the days to come, that's another agenda that I'm going to push, that governors must be inspired, motivated to follow their responsibility as per the Constitution to chair the meetings of the TAC, to do them not at 7 in the evening, but at about 11 in the morning, and to take serious meetings to deliberate on tribal development issues. One thing that Haq Saab also mentioned, and that is that, implementation of various laws and developmental features for the tribals has not been done successfully because the forest bureaucracy is weak. I don't think the forest bureaucracy is weak. I think...
I did not say this.
No,
Forest. Forest officials are strong.
Strong.
The tribal affairs ministry.
Yeah,
which
so,
is the nodal
so,
agency,
so
they are-
Haksab, yeah, so in that context, what I would like to suggest is that it's a good time. I mean, those who are connected with tribals should ask that the forest department should be subsumed under the tribal department.
Exactly.
And that is the, because the homogeneity of need, the developmental aspirations of the tribals, they are so closely connected with those of with the forest that you cannot have a distinct forest department today without looking at the needs of the tribal also. So they have to be synergized. Perhaps the best way of synergizing them is that the tribal department should subsume within it the forest department. All reserved forests and tribals living within them, all reserved forest areas should, in my view, be declared scheduled areas, because the tribals living there do not have any special positions, and if they are declared scheduled areas, then maybe the governor can pass certain laws to ensure that they are protected. There is a clear distinction between the methodology of the 5th schedule and the 6th schedule, and perhaps there lies somewhat the answer to Mr. Jameer's philosophical question. And the 6th schedule has autonomous district councils, it has autonomous regional councils. Of course, when we talk to the Ministry of Northeastern Region donor, they will always say that there is a lot of corruption which is happening in these district councils and advisory councils. That may be so. But I would still say that giving autonomy is a much better thing. At least you will ensure, and the Constitution gives a very large portfolio of features that can be fulfilled by those district councils and regional councils. I think that model for the scheduled areas may be a better model to follow if that can be done. CAMPA, that is the compensatory afforestation laws, there we found that the latest guidelines that they have brought out, there was some issue about them being diluted. So my take on that is that they have allowed, we had made one recommendation before those guidelines were made, and we had said that those who are displaced from dams and from tiger reserves, etc., that CAMPA funds should also be allowed to be utilized for their rehabilitation, especially if those displaced from tiger reserves. So they have included that. They can be utilized for that, but they have said that utilization of funds will be administered by will have to be approved with, they have said, JFMs, etc., or consultation with the Gram Sabha. I would say that it should remain just the Gram Sabha. The Gram Sabha's consultation and approval should be made mandatory. So this is something we'll take up. There was another issue which has come up in recent days about tiger reserves versus the tribal, and the Ministry of Environment and Forest has been, they issued, despite the fact that they are, the Forest Rights Act is there, despite the fact that their guidelines were not fully done, they issued an order in 2017 March saying that tribals can be displaced from the tiger reserves. So we have asked the Ministry of Environment to pull back that circular and to not permit any displacement of tribals from tiger reserves until and unless their guidelines for rehabilitation and resettlement are duly approved by us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Not only just clarified certain things, but I think made forceful recommendations, I think, which should be considered. Now, Rabi or Walter? Maybe afterwards, yeah, okay.
Okay, thank you very much for this opportunity, Namita and others. And congratulations on the excellent report. I've been working on the tribal issues for nearly 40 years now, but I learned much from the report. Thank you for it. I just want to comment on a few points you have made without commenting on the report as such. The first is Article 342, which gives so much power to the president, which has been devolved to the governor. The question we need to ask, I feel, is not legal, what are the powers given, but actual, has that been implemented? In how many cases has the governor used these powers in favor of the tribes? To the best of my knowledge, there's only one case in Andhra Pradesh back in the 1980s when P.S. Krishnan was the Secretary of Welfare. He got the governor to issue an order when Naxalism was really growing there, and he realized that the dispossession of the tribes was the main reason. Just as Jairam Ramesh realized, he said it in his 2011 Sardar Patel Act, that the reason for Naxalism in the tribal Chhattisgarh and other tribal areas is land acquisition. Otherwise, it has not been implemented. And that brings me to the second question. Why? Why this neglect? Well, I think, as you said, Ministry of Tribal Affairs was formed only in 1999. Before that, till 1999, it came under the Home Ministry. But it's important to remember that in the Home Ministry, it was under the Department of Welfare. And that, I think, is indicative of what is happening. There is, you have mentioned, the whole conflict between the identity-based demands of the tribes and the development with integration demands of the Congress party, which became the official demand of the government. I think it's important to realize that what we owe to the tribals was viewed as welfare rather than a right. The 1952 forest policy is representative of that. From tribal rights, Nistar rights, to privileges, to officially in the policy, it is put as concessions. I think, and that has been the thinking, predominant thinking, and that is seen in this conflict itself of development, integration through development, or identity-based rights. These are seen as contradictory, and there has been no thinking of integration. The government of India signed ILO Convention 37 of 1957, not because it does not speak of integration, it speaks of assimilation. The thinking is assimilation, which is the substream joining the mainstream without protecting its identity. While the Convention 69 of 1989, the government of India has not signed it because it speaks of integration. Terms of integration, which is the subalterns joining the so-called mainstream while retaining their identity and their rights. And the government, and at the official level, and the mainstream India is not ready to accept that. And that, I think, you have dealt with in the whole thinking of predominance of minerals in their area. The freedom fighters wanted development, but development, if you see the whole discussion between 1945 and 51, when the first plan was, is development as infrastructure building with very little importance given to the poor. There's no thinking of inclusive development. I think that integration, rejection of integration, acceptance of assimilation. Similarly, the predominance, the understanding of development, even in the Bombay Plan 1945, which is the basis of the mixed economy. I think that has to be seen in the understanding of development. So you have the whole scheduled area development, but it is development of the area, not of the people. Tribal subplans come very much as a concession. And for the first time, we have the PESA Act. It's not just the FRA, Forest Rights Act 2006. A new beginning to my thinking was made in 1996 by the PESA Act. As Mr. Raghav Chandra said, the fifth schedule is the basis, is the governing act. And for the first time, an effort was made to implement it at the local level through the PESA Act. And the FRA succeeds it. But I think we need to look at the whole issue of development versus identity. They are today contradictory. The tribal rights are not recognized. The number, as I've calculated, is much bigger than 85 lakh tribals. This one, mine comes to 40% of about 65 million displaced and project-affected persons. 85 lakhs displaced, but the total DPs and PAPs comes to around 26 million, 260 lakhs, out of 65 million 1947 to 2010. And that includes also others, those displaced for all types of projects, including defense, transport, and so on. Now, resettlement, 17% is of the total, much lower among the tribes. I think we need to look at it because resettlement itself is viewed as welfare, not as a right of the displaced. So that is where I think we need to try to put the two together. The contradiction has to disappear. The starting point has to be Article 21, which the Supreme Court has interpreted as every citizen's right to a life with dignity, not the eminent domain. But development has to be inclusive. These two have to be combined. And integration has to be the basis where the tribal identity is protected while using their resources for national development. National development has to cease to be only area development, but a combination of economic growth, infrastructure development, people's development, and environment protection. These have to be combined. Today, and the environment and people are ignored. Priority goes to this one. And one last point on S.C. Jamil's question, since I'm in the Northeast. I do not quite agree with you, Mr. Raghav Chandra, that it's the autonomy that has protected the tribals of the Northeast. The difference, the main reason to my thinking is that the exploitation of the resources began much later, is only very recent. So they focused on their identity, and only now they are beginning to realize their resources are being exploited without them being considered. The impoverishment of the tribes of mainland, you may not like it, but in the Northeast we keep repeating that. We call it mainland India. Yeah. Now, the thing is, say, deforestation. In the 19th century, it began in Western India and Southern India, moved eastwards and northwards. In the 1980s, Jharkhand and Orissa were exploited. And after that began the exploitation of forests in Uttarakhand and in the Northeast. Similar is the case with minerals. So it's looking at their areas as mineral rich to be developed for area development and not tribal development. And if we are not careful, the same will happen in the Northeast, except that they have had an opportunity for education and they have been able to protect their identity, which they are not ready to give up, and there will be much greater struggles. And you see that now today as the resources are exploited, the changeover from nationalist struggles of the 1950s to ethnic conflicts today, each tribe trying to protect its resource from the others and from outsiders. And finally, the sixth schedule, yes, it's good on paper, but it's extremely poor in practice, because the administrator uses the clauses of the sixth schedule to take over their resources by declaring, say, under the sixth schedule, you need the permission of the village council. In practice, the administrator treats the village chief as the owner, negotiates with him or bribes him, I won't say what comes first, and takes over land, pays compensation only to the chief, and then he distributes it among the families, the amount depending on their closeness to him. Now, this is something that we should say. There is the whole interface of the formal law with their tradition. That has not been dealt with, exactly as the identity and development part and integration part has not been dealt with. The formal tradition interface has to be dealt with. And I think these are the areas when we should find the way forward. I better stop. Sorry, I've gone far beyond my 10 minutes, I think. No, not much. Okay, thank you. I'll stop at that.
Thank you, Walter. Now I request Mr. Rabi.
Morning, everybody. And yeah, great work to the team that has gone through these 4 years and come out with, if Walter has said it, I don't have to repeat. So things like only percentage of the scheduled tribe population are actually living in the scheduled areas. These were some things that really came out from your study, which really opened many of our eyes, I guess, to these aspects. Now, instead of going into, so I do agree with the study, and like you said, it's a work in progress, and it can, branch off into various things. But let me just look at, say, what you wrote to me in the email as to, in these 30 years, what is the aspiration, what is the thing that the younger generation thinks. So what is the reality that is in front of us? While Dr. Huck and Ramesh ji and Walter have already shown what are the issues in terms of policy and law, I will just go into the point where actually if you see the constitutional scheme of the fifth schedule, the governor, the TAC, and then in Andhra we had these integrated tribal development agencies thanks to Mr. S.R. Shankaran and B.D. Sharma and others. So we had a single line administration where all the line departments actually have to report to the project officer for their service registers and things like that. But of late, I see there's another conflict. You see, the conflict between law and policy. So soon after the signing of our new economic policy, there used to be a lot of workshops, at least for people like us in the NGO field, about how this new economic policy will affect people's lives and things like that. And I used to wonder, those days we were in the village, and I used to wonder how can they prevent us from using neem? How can they prevent us from using what is there? But now, in these, since 91 to now, when I see, they have really messed up with this constitutional scheme only through policy. So the district administration, the state governments, the corporations, so all these people are only using what, just some policies, and their, it's like AP Mineral Development Corporation, Orissa Mining Corporation, AP Tourism Development Corporation. Now I see that in the 30 years, the development corporations are the actual land grabbers now. Because the Samata judgment has said that you cannot, at least to the extent of Andhra Pradesh, that you cannot lease lands to other than scheduled tribe. So the government, the state government goes into a damage control method where it would grant the lease to the Mineral Development Corporation, and then the state government enters into a MOU with XYZ. So that's one way where they are trying to, so it's a constant effort of how to dilute this. It's not like somebody is sitting there and doing this, but as I observe, over a period of time, the training that is being given to officers at Lal Bahadur Shastri Academy also has a bearing on how a young officer will deal with an issue. Because when I compare a sub-collector from 1980 to a sub-collector today, there's a marked difference in the approach that the sub-collector has. He is no doubt is his first job, and I've had officers who have taken the pain to go back up to 1923, set right land record, and give patas in the recent times, in 2015. But I've also had experience with people who are saying, listen, now the court system has changed, so now you go to the court, don't come to us. Unless I get instructions from top, there's nothing that I will do. Whereas it's the job of the sub-collector to inquire into some Benami transaction or something that is happening in his jurisdiction. So this is one trend that I've seen. The other trend, when you look at tribal youth, for whatever good or bad, we got them educated, we put them in schools. 30 years back, there used to be lots of children in a village when we go. Today, all the children are in the school. Definitely, it's a good move. There we have now given them another aspiration. You see, now we fought the Samata judgment, and the communities there fought, withstood the Birlas and others. Essentially because the leaders, the tribal leaders, were the old type, and they believed in agriculture, forestry, and minor forest produce collection and hunting and things like that. Today, the onslaught of roads, mobiles, bikes, and our education, the tribal youth are actually asking us as to why can't we mine? So it's been a struggle for Samata itself within our organization and within the area as to move from a no mining position to a position where, yes, you tribal people should mine. I mean, it's your right. So there is that trend, there's a change in that aspiration. And if you see, all the tribal educated people who are employees in the government have moved to the cities because of their children's education. So there's definitely a change. I mean, the village is not the same. The village that I went to in 30 years back and the village now is quite different. And today, in those days, I mean, on the side, in those days, to gather crowds, we used to sing a few songs and play a few drums. But today, we need to take a Jio Wi-Fi and switch it on, then everybody will come. So there is a change, So that change we need to, I don't know what to do. I mean, I really have no idea. But this is the dominant culture that has gone in. And so therefore, even in terms of dressing style, hairstyle, there's no difference between Bombay and say Araku Valley or Paderu. So, whereas now the children don't want to go back and do any agriculture. So that's a big issue. Because what do you do? Okay, your parents do agriculture, but now you don't want to do agriculture. There's no job for you. So therefore, you get into mining, you get into various other things that so far they never thought of. Like in our tribal area in Visakhapatnam, ganja cultivation and commercial smuggling has become so big that people have stopped actually cultivating crops because this is more lucrative. Even if the cops catch you, there is a system to handle this, and the money involved in that is so much that you find motorcycles of 3 lakhs, 5 lakhs in a place where we had to walk 20 kilometers at one time. So these are some changes that have come in, and government has become very apathetic in that sense compared to that time. And now they are looking at 5-star hotels, tourism projects, all to do with again taking away land from the people locally. Like in a town called Chintapalli, there are a few hamlets, and recently some of them came to us and said, we have built houses in our common land, but now we got a notice from the Tahsildar that they're going to build a jail here or a court complex. Now what do we do? So things like this, where it's their own government, their own people who have to protect them, have become, actually negative, or they are unable to deal with what to do with it. And the situation in Andhra, there is no Tribes Advisory Council since 2011. And so right now there is no TSE, sir. Absolutely. And politically, like Namita did say that, if you see regional parties having some 5 or 6 MPs like TRS or AIDMK or anybody, normally get a good berth in the ministry when a government of coalition forms. But हमारा आदिवासी दोस्त लोग है 48 MP था UPA 2 में, मगर एक ही किशोर चंद्र देव था जो he said that actually he didn't have any teeth. His ministry didn't have any teeth. That was his complaint. So, well, we used to say, you're 48 MPs, can't you do anything? Now that comes back to the point of heterogeneity and the differences in the tribe. So, well, this is a situation where I guess it is left to the young tribal leaders to handle all this and see what can be done. While the framework of the constitution is still there, it has not been dismantled that way. It's just the policy, because if you see from Ranchi to Vijayawada corridor, Delhi to Mumbai corridor, ये सब ये कॉरिडोर में काफी आदिवासी जाएंगे, काफी जमीन जाएगा, और कॉरिडोर के लिए
It is already Maharashtra governor already notification declared.
Yeah, Vidyasagar Rao. Though we thought Vidyasagar Rao was a very progressive person, because when in Andhra he was the opposition leader and he did raise issues in the assembly when we were fighting the Samta judgment. But I guess you have to fall in line with the government or with the party. So things like this are happening, and it is unfortunate. I really don't know. I feel it's a lost cause in one sense when I look at it from a pessimistic point of view. But I guess there is still a chance if tribal leaders realize this and take it up. Like recently I was in Gujarat, where the Adivasi Ekta Parishad had this very massive 1 to 2 lakh people gathering, and a lot of tribal leaders had come and spoken there. But there is a contradiction there also, because many of them are in the government, and so what do you do is a big question for them also. Well, I'll leave it here. There are no answers, no solutions. It is just a trend that I could say. And we have not thought of one thing in all these years, the psychology of a displaced person. If you really imagine a woman or a man or a child, we have still not agreed to these, social impacts of projects, or we have removed whatever is there in the Land Acquisition Act. the new act. But if you really see, if you talk to somebody who has been displaced, it's a really sad situation because they really don't know where, what is going to happen. Now, Polavaram is the next disaster because they're going to put some 250 villages in 4 or 5 locations together. So that will be like a huge slum created by the project, apart from all the corruption and whatever scams will happen. But imagine getting all these villages, some villages are just 20, 30 households, and they're in a nice forest area, they have their land. Now they'll be pushed to some city near Rajahmundry and put into matchboxes that the engineering department will build. So that's a next disaster. I really don't know what we can do about it. Already in Andhra, these scams are coming up on the rehabilitation thing, which you rightly have said. So, well, and splitting Andhra and Telangana also has an effect on the tribal areas in Andhra. All this merging and all that, because ultimately land records, all that revenue matters, so many things when you actually cut a particular area and say this belongs to this and this belongs to that, the land records actually take the beating ultimately because cases and courts, so it's all a pending thing. Like one last thing I'll tell you, 1967 Andhra has a Forest Act. We have the dubious distinction of having a State Forest Act. And since 1967, the process of settlement of land is happening all over Telangana and Andhra. It got completed about 15 years back, and the award was passed by the forest settlement officer. And the forest department went to the court, and the court said restart proceedings due to some irregularity in process. Which means 45 years they waited, and now restart proceedings means another 45 years. This is legitimate land of the tribal people. They have been in occupation, and in Visakhapatnam district itself, about 1,15,000 acres is in question. Shastri Saab knows this much better. He's dealt with it in both the places. So you see, if a land settlement process itself takes 45 years and then they restart proceedings, when will they ever get their land? You know, and Forest Rights Act is also to be implemented there. No, they don't want to entertain that because bauxite is there. So if they entertain, then you have to extinguish that right. So therefore, the state is not really bothered, and it is just going ahead with all these corporations and a lot of money and MOUs. You know, that's all. So, well, I end it here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ravi. Now I request Mr. Amrish.
Only, I would take only a few minutes because congratulations, thanks, and it has been a pleasure to be part of this process. So we have already commented on the report last time, and most of the points have already come, so nothing much. A few points. One point on this conflict between development versus identity. I think for tribal areas, it has largely been that they have been victims of the development. They themselves never got benefit from the development. To take dams, minerals, everything, they did not get any benefit from the development, and they became the victims. So it is rather not that conflict, that they have never received development. They have never been part of the development, whether that, it does not mean that their self-governance or identity issues are not of importance. They are of importance, and they want development with identity. That is what everywhere tribals have been wanting, but they have not been receiving it. That is the main issue. I still remember when we were working in the early days of early 80s for this resettlement of tribals being evicted by Sardar Sarovar project. And you go to the offices of executive engineer, they would, without blinking his eyes, he could tell us that tribal don't have a right to sacrifice for the nation. So giving them benefit, they would use, and most of the people believe that tribe development करना है तो कुछ ट्राइबल के घर तो जाएंगे, जमीनें जाएंगी, उसमें हम क्या करेंगे? That is how these things could happen, and it was that after a long struggle we could get some policy and which is much better than any other areas. Those things are there. And so with struggle, despite all this pessimism, there is a chance. That is thing. But let us come to this FRA. Because as you rightly pointed out, the things started changing from PESA and then FRA took it further. The main issue with PESA, as in Gujarat, we never saw PESA implemented. For us, the first experience, PESA Act was there, but rules were never notified. Rules were never notified, so it was never implemented. So first experience of our tribal areas of local self-governance or some autonomy or some decisive-making powers for the Gram Sabha came under FRA only. FRA, the committees were formed under Gram Sabha. They had the right to decide claims, make recommendations. They have a right to much greater control over forest resources than was ever there under PESA. So this is how FRA is very important. FRA is very important not only from forest-related issues, but how to go ahead in other areas also, like say minerals and other areas, how to take this process forward. But FRA, so two aspects to FRA, individual lands, titles for individual lands and community forest resources, right over the community, including forest resources largely. In both, implementation is very poor all across the state, everybody knows. And as you pointed out, it is largely because of the forest department, which has created n numbers of stumbling blocks in the implementation process. They have created one hurdle after another, and that goes. So we have only 45% titles approved, that also with much less area than what they are actually entitled to. So that issue nobody talks about, that although we have 40% approved, the area which they have received is much less than what they are legally entitled to, because arbitrarily, Forest Department reduced the area. You have claimed 8 acres, you are entitled to 8 acres, they would approve only 1 acre. I can, so lists and lists of claims approved, which have only same amount of land approved for all of them, 1 acre, 1 acre, 1 acre. So those things are happening. In most of the states, the remaining 70%, most of them have already been decided and rejected. Decided wrongly rejected. So nobody can believe that only 40% are genuine claims and 60 to 70% of the claims are false. Even cursory glance would tell us that these are wrong rejections, rejected wrongly due to the influence, heavy influence of Forest Department. And yet, demand is not that why so many have been rejected. What can we do to rectify this situation? That is not a demand. In fact, there is now already a clamor that these rejected claims, people should be evicted from this land. What is being done to remove them from this land? That is the claims being made by, demands being made by the so-called environmental groups and forest groups. And in fact, Supreme Court, Samuna ji is here, she would tell us that recently only some order has been issued to file asking state governments to file affidavits that how many of the rejected claims you have evicted. So we require, if we really want to do these things, we require a much greater commitment, both at the central level and the state level for the implementation of this Forest Right Act than what we have witnessed so far. That is what is required on a big way. And then taking this process forward for other areas also, say mineral. Why they can have a share in mineral royalty, which would help, which would create a situation where we have development with identity preserved, so that tribals can also develop and they get benefit from the processes and they can also maintain their identity and self-respect. That is the only that thing.